If the meeting of the Public Safety and Homeland Security will please come to order. As we always do, we begin our meeting with a word of prayer. So at this time, I'd ask Representative Bob Hanner.
Let's pray, please. Father, we thank you for this day, this wonderful day. We thank you for the wonderful opportunity that you have given us to serve both you and the people of Georgia. We ask that you guide and direct us in the paths that we go. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask Senator Grant if he will come forward on Senate Bill 411. Let me also state, as chairman of the committee, we have had House Bill 1141 that had passed out of our committee and was in rules of the House. Senate Bill 411 was the one that had mirrored that bill. There has been some changes, and Senator Grant has been willing to come over and just go through the changes. There will be no testimony in regards to this piece of legislation, nor will there be a vote. So at this time, if you will, Senator Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Would you prefer for me to present from here or from the podium?
Wherever you're comfortable.
All right. Well, I will start from here. I'll be happy to give any background information about this if you would like. But first, I will try to point out the changes that were made in the floor of the Senate from the House bill that I think this committee had heard at a previous date. First, on line 67. There, at one time, the draft had the authorities should be the sole owner of information. That word "sole" was struck from the language. The authorities shall still be the owner of the information, and this is the compiled information. This is not the underlying data that was originated in a sheriff's office or in a particular county. This is just that compiled information. This committee had previously made a change that incorporated some language that the DOT wanted to make sure that their transportation safety funds were not in jeopardy on this, and we did make a change in the Senate version which had not included that language. I won't point that out because that's had already been included in your version. Let's see. On lines 83 through 85, those lines were added in a Senate amendment. It says, nothing contained herein shall be construed so as to modify or conflict with these open records provisions, and any information not subject to public inspection upon federal or state law shall be confidential and not subject to public disclosure. This was out of an abundance of caution, just restating that this is not in conflict with open records. Those records are still available and open at the individual department where those were generated, and this is not trying to circumvent or to replace open records law by any stretch of the imagination. And then finally, the last change that was made was on lines 155 and 157. Legislative Council had suggested that if we did not explicitly grant an authority a power, that it did not exist, but there was some confusion about that, and so to make sure that this authority did not have bonding capacity, we added the language that you'll see on 155 to 157, where it says, however, that the authority shall not be authorized to issue revenue bonds, refunding bonds, notes, interim certificates, or any other type of or similar bonded indebtedness or evidences of indebtedness of the authority. So that makes it perfectly clear that the Sheriff's Authority does not have any bonding capacity. Those four changes, the open records, the bonding capacity, the DOT correction, and the reduction or elimination of the word sole, were the changes that we made on the Senate floor. Those are what you'll see here as the differences from the final version that of the House bill that this committee reviewed and passed out. This is something that I think is very much needed for the sheriffs to continue to do the good work that they do in our communities. And one of the things that I think is particularly interesting to note is that we're asking, and we have asked for years, for the sheriffs to do a variety of things in the record-keeping capacity. We've asked them to keep sex offender databases, and we just recently, we're going through the process of asking them to keep databases on secondary metal recyclers and to keep the transactions for each of those. And these are some very, very cumbersome and complicated databases that we're asking them to keep. And this authority would give them the ability to better serve the legislature and serve the people of Georgia in keeping up this information that we've asked the sheriffs to compile. I'll be happy to answer any questions, or I will stand down and excuse myself from the room so you can get on to your other business. And I hope at some very soon we may be able to actually come and bring this for a vote from this committee.
Well, I'm not going to entertain any questions because the significance was to come and speak with us in regards to the changes in the bill as it left the Senate and came over to the House. And would you like to make any closing comments? As you note that we just are using this as a time to update us as to what the differences were with House Bill 1141 to the Senate Bill 411.
Well, the only thing that I would make is that these changes that we made, we felt like were already addressed in the original versions of the House bill and the Senate bill, but because of confused readings of the bills, we were, out of an abundance of caution, restating some of these changes. The Sheriff's Authority never sought nor were granted, in our estimation, bonding capacity. And so we were very comfortable in being able to put that language in. It was never thought that the Sheriff's Authority would try to circumvent Open Records Act. And so we felt very comfortable in making sure that that language was restated. It was never the intention of the Sheriff's Authority to try to jeopardize the DOT funding that deals with their crash reports. So we're very comfortable in doing that. And the only thing that the Sheriff's Authority wanted to maintain ownership was that compiled data. And so we, the changes that we made in the Senate, we don't feel changed the complexion or the purpose of the underlying bill. And so we were happy to accommodate the various folks that came up to us with those concerns. I do commend the Senate Bill 411 to you. I think it's a good piece of legislation. I think it's been viewed and vetted by each of you members as it was a House bill. The Senate bill, when it passed through the Senate, it was unanimous, but not unanimously, but very, very strongly supported by the Senate. And I hope it's very soon that we may be able to bring a vote and bring this to the floor of the House of Representatives. And I'll be happy to answer questions for any of you individually if you would care to catch me after the meeting or sometime on the floor.
That sounds great. Thank you, Senator Grant, for coming over and taking the time to update us on the two bills and the intent of the direction that hopefully or possibly will be taken. Okay. So thank you so very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
At this time, I see that we have Senator Heath with us, and we will now take up Senate Bill 432. And as you're coming forward, Senator Heath, for those of you that may be here for the first time, we do have a quorum here today. As we're reviewing the bills, it is the always the understanding that for testimony on any piece of legislation, that anyone that wishes to testify needs to sign in. Of course, we will allow within time limits. There is 3 minutes that you will be allowed to speak. The author is able to speak, address the committee, as well as the committee will be answering or asking questions to the author. And then we will hear testimony following that. So with that, Senator Heath, you're up for Senate Bill 432.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 432 is intended to perform a very simple function. That is to provide knife laws and knife ordinances across the state that are uniform, so that someone who comes into this state with a pocket knife can have a single source for the regulations on what sizes are permissible and what kinds of knives, those kind of things, so that they can go there and know that they're in compliance with the law and travel about this state without having to worry about happening up in a community or a town that has some different knife legislation that might make the knife that would otherwise be legal be illegal. So the bill as it was originally drafted had a flaw in it, an unintended flaw that would have prohibited schools from having rules in their school restricting knives more so than the state law. So that was pointed out to me, and we corrected that. As we worked through this bill actually went through the Senate Judiciary Committee. When we worked through that, there was some concerns by ACCG and GMA about being able to have rules in courthouses and government buildings to provide security for their workforce there. So we worked with them to get the language drafted in the form that you see there, and to my knowledge, we have agreement with ACCG and GMA on the language. I have not heard from anyone that opposes the language since we got those changes in it. So
Senator Heath, you're speaking from LC 295222S?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the version that passed the Senate.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yes, ma'am. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Do we have any questions from committee members? We have Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Senator Heath, what is the purpose of this bill? What brought on this bill?
There has not been a problem. This is not a reactionary measure. This is just simply to provide a way for people who want to abide by the laws to have a source, a way to go find out what the laws are in Georgia, and to feel comfortable that once they find out what Georgia's knife laws are, that they are in compliance regardless of where they are in the state, not have to go check each little community that they might travel through as they drive through the state. As you know, a knife has many uses, one of which is a tool that farmers and ranchers, electricians, tradesmen use on a regular basis, and so we want to be sure that those folks don't get into trouble because of just a patchwork of laws across the state or regulations.
Thank you.
Representative. Any other questions from committee members? All right, let's hear from
I'll
those.
be available if you have any other questions.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
sounds good. We have Mr. Todd Rathner. And if you will, please introduce yourself and 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Todd Rathner, and I represent an organization called Knife Rights, which is a knife owners, collectors, and industry association. SB 432 is important because Georgia is unique to knife owners all around the country and, in fact, all around the world. Georgia is the home of the Blade Show, which is the largest knife show in the world. It represents millions of dollars that come into the economy around the Atlanta area, and it represents lots of jobs. We think hundreds of jobs, and roughly 10,000 people come into the Atlanta area in the Cobb Galleria to attend the Blade Show. One of our concerns is that there are knives that are being sold at the Blade Show that could potentially, based on a half-inch or a quarter-inch difference in length, that could potentially put somebody into legal jeopardy if they cross into Atlanta to have dinner or go to a hotel or entertain themselves in some other way. There are concerns that if they got hung up, the publicity for something like that would be terrible, and quite frankly, the Blade Show would have to move to a state that was more friendly to knife owners, and that is one of the primary reasons that I'm before you today, because the knife industry is very concerned about that. They love Georgia, they love coming here. Everybody enjoys Atlanta and being able to participate in the nightlife and the amenities that are offered there. And there is concern that at some point someone may get hung up on, like I said, a quarter-inch or a half-inch difference in length or something like that, and cause a problem. And that's the primary reason that I'm here to speak to you today. I'll keep it short. I'll just keep it at that because other than the fact that there ought to be consistency across the state for someone who is a hunter or electrician or somebody who carries a knife every day, there ought to be consistency because it's fair. And it makes sense and it's logical. But other than that, I'll just stand for questions if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do I have anyone else that would like to testify for or against the bill? All right, seeing none, do I have any other questions from committee members? Number 27, who is that, Doug? Representative Hogan.
Thank you, Chairwoman Purcell. My question, and it was alluded to, is just can you give us some more definition in terms of the disparities with the ordinances? Like what's Atlanta's ordinance versus the state? I understand the state is over 5 inches, and if you could give us a sense of the patchwork and how many varying degrees there are.
Senator to come back and respond.
I am unaware of of local ordinances that would be in conflict. This is preemptive in nature to keep the rules, regulations consistent across the state. This is not in response to a known problem. Mr. Rathner mentioned Atlanta, for example. I think that was simply an example where you got somebody that's come into one area to do business and they happen into another jurisdiction for dinner or what have you.
Help me understand, if there's not a problem, then why do we need the law?
This is to prevent that problem where someone does adopt an ordinance that would be more restrictive than state law. So the state law would apply all across the state, and there's one source where you can go and find what that law is, as opposed to having to look it up. Let's say you were traveling through the state and you got to look through every little jurisdiction that you drive through. It is preemptive in nature.
Continue.
Does one follow-up, Madam Chair, if I can, because I want to make sure that I understand it. I thought that state law does preempt municipal ordinances, doesn't it?
Not without this, to my knowledge, not without this measure.
So what you're submitting is that local ordinances or local governments can pass bills that trump state law?
The more restrictive would apply without this measure. This just simply says that state law will apply across the board uniformly. Without this, a county or a city could adopt a more restrictive ordinance.
So, for example, less than 4 or less than 5 inches or something like that?
Provided for in state law.
Okay.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you. I'm still a little confused also. So if I was traveling from Alabama and crossing over to Georgia state line, does the police and our local police department and our state patrol, do they know when they stop me if I got a long hunting knife? Do they know the dimension of the of that blade and whether it's legal or not? I mean, I'm just looking, you're saying you're doing this potentially if something might happen. So are they educated enough to know that I'm carrying an illegal blade across the line or what?
I'm,
And how
I'm-
would they know?
I'm not in law enforcement. I actually saw someone back here earlier that could speak to that issue. But let me say this. I believe that those employed in this state, whether it be in a police force, sheriff's department, Georgia State Patrol, GBI, whoever is in this state to enforce the laws, have a responsibility to know those laws. So I suspect that if you got stopped in a traffic stop and you had an illegal knife, that they would be knowledgeable enough to recognize that. That's not the problem so much as the fact that you might come through here with a knife that was legal where you lived, but you travel through a jurisdiction that had a more restrictive ordinance.
Okay, I just guess I didn't know that each county had their own ordinances. That's it. Thank you.
Any additional questions from our committee members? Seeing none, what is the thoughts of our
Madam Chairman,
Representative Talton?
I make a motion that Senate Bill 432 do pass.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, calling for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, likewise. Okay, one nay. All right, we have one nay and two nays, and all others are yeses, correct?
Yes.
All right, so the bill passes.
Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead to rules.
members of the committee, thank you.
Thank you. Our next bill on the agenda today will be Senator Donzella James, Senate Bill 238.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening, and thank you so much for hearing Senate Bill 238. This bill is a safety bill for those who are handicapped or who find themselves after an accident needing a wheelchair that's motorized or a scooter and are still active. And as you may have noticed even yourself, that here in the city, there are a lot of motorized wheelchairs and scooters going up and down the street just in this area. And it is a safety hazard in that in the area that I represent called Christian City, they have a lot of people who are only mobile because they use these scooters or motorized wheelchairs to go back and forth to the main building to eat or the store. It's all in one little community. They go to rehabilitation, so they find themselves going back and forth across the street. And this would just be reflectors that are approved by bicycle safety that would go on the front and sides of these vehicles. And it would save a lot of lives, I believe, or especially a lot of accidents that are occurring now. So it's just a simple little bill to provide safety for those who find themselves in need of a vehicle, especially on the streets. This is just on the streets, too, because they find themselves on public byways, out in the public, and especially at dusk dark when they cannot be seen. So I ask for I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions from the committee. We have Representative Hanner.
Let me ask you a question. I'm not
Yes.
that I'm opposed to your bill, but what's the punishment? What's the penalty? I mean, I'm not trying to throw you here. I'm just curious. I mean, say again.
You know, we had penalty in the first legislation. Let's see, do I have as passed by the Senate? It was taken out by the Senate.
Okay.
It would just be a ticket.
Well, the publicity of it might be enough anyway, but okay. I'm just curious.
Representative Horn, I know you made a comment to Representative Hanner to answer. Can you share with us, or would you want to?
Well, I said,
You don't want to hear what he
maybe it's
said.
in the code section, but then I noticed that this is a new code section. So
Okay.
I guess there is no code.
Thank you. All right, we have Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Can you talk a little bit about how you came up with 200 feet? That sounds reasonable, but just what was the barometer of that?
Yes, Representative Holcomb. As a matter of fact, I used the same bicycle safety rules, and for the reflectors, that is the visibility that must be seen. In fact, most bicycle manufacturers now include it on the new bicycles that are being sold, so that you can see it at least from 200 feet. And so that's in our highway safety. When they give out the reflectors and the helmets for the young people to ride, they give them free. And when they do, they have a little pamphlet, and 200 feet is listed there as well.
That's the standard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate this bill, and I actually have a young man in my community that was injured in his little scooter driving across the street in the evening. Two things. I, too, was looking for some type of penalty, carrot and stick. Okay, this is what it is. I would like to see something like that. The other part of it is goes a little bit further. I'm concerned that many people, when they get these vehicles, treat them almost as if they are a car, and they drive in the roadways with them. And that is a concern for me. Are there any instructions or law enforcement is told to these people when they get these scooters what they're supposed to do and what they're not? They treat them sometimes, honestly, like an automobile. And that's my concern. Are they going to feel that way, that I have the right now to be here because I've got a reflector? And again, I'd like to see some kind of punitive if you don't follow it.
Hopefully they will not think that, because right now they are under ordinances in different cities and counties that are the same as bicycles, so they're included, because there are more and more people who are riding in the street. But I don't think that the reflectors will give them more confidence to be in the street. I think it will make them be more visible so that someone will not run over them. Hopefully they will honor the sidewalks and the bicycle lanes in the case where they have bicycle lanes.
Thank you.
And they are acceptable in bicycle lanes in, I think, 40 places. I did a lot of research, and I can provide that.
Well,
for you.
would this person that did not put these reflectors on, would they get the same penalty that a bicycle would get? Is that what it is right now?
There are no penalties for the bicycles.
Okay.
I think it's just a way to.
Do they have to wear helmets
have
also?
safety.
Are they
Excuse me?
required? Are people on these little vehicles, scooters, motorized wheelchairs, are they required to wear a helmet also?
No, they're not. And most of them who ride those on a regular basis on the public ways are used the same as a golf cart. See, there are golf carts that are being used in places like Peachtree City and probably about 30 other cities now in the state of Georgia. And so they put the motorized scooters in the same category as the golf carts. And so, but it's local ordinances that have to put the penalties on it.
Okay, thank you.
At this time.
Representative Cook.
Chairman, Senator, I understand your intent, and but just a couple quick questions, if I could.
Yes.
The first one, if we're doing this for people who are in these scooters, what's the difference in me walking across the street at night? But like, I guess my question is, isn't it kind of the personal responsibility issue in that they need to make sure the roadway's clear crossing the street at night, just like I would myself?
This is so that you can be seen. A person who is taller and visible can be seen more so. And of course, they would have the same safety requirements that you would have as far as a light is concerned, or making sure that the road is clear. So it does not have any difference. Only you can see a person, and I do have that information too. I didn't bring that with me.
Oh, one follow-up, if I might. While I understand what you're saying about maybe the height issue here and there, also a scooter's wider though than a person would be. So I mean, if we're looking at it from that aspect, I don't see, quite honestly, that if this is needed, then how would it not be needed for people? Not that I'm suggesting that we put reflectors on people, because I just think it's a personal responsibility issue, whether it's, instead of putting in a code, that if I'm on a scooter, it's my due diligence for my own personal life to make sure the roadway is clear as I'm going through. I guess I'm just having a hard time, and that's what I was hoping you could explain, the difference between people and
many
scooter.
people who walk at night or jog at night do have the clothes that have reflectors of the colors on it so they can be seen. And you're right, it is a personal responsibility. However, on these scooters, we're just trying to put reflectors on so they can be seen by other vehicles as well and other people who are walking.
Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward, too. I only got one question for you. In these reflectors, they're to be approved by the Department of Public Safety. Are these, can you purchase them at any hardware store, department store, Walmart? Are they already labeled approved?
Yes, sir. They are the same as bicycle reflectors, and they cost, if you're just buying the reflectors themselves, according to the size and the way you stick them up, put them on, then it's under $10. But if you want the nicer kind, and then they are with wheelchair companies do sell them now. I've called around and I found out that is one manufacturer that makes them, and that is like $39.99. So it's up to the person which one they want to buy. One for $10 or one for under $50.
So there's a deluxe then.
Deluxe.
Thank you.
Well, I think it has a flag on it as well. And it's the same as, it's nothing that public safety will have to do because it's already been approved by the U.S. Safety Department, and it's the same as bicycles, reflectors.
Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator James, in Augusta, I have seen some of the motorized wheelchairs with the, whether you can call them souped up or not, but they got the ones that looks like disco lights. Is that considered a reflector? I mean, they be out there, and I can see them because they fluttering all over the place. Well, is that considered a reflector?
That's considered a reflector too, because you can get reflectors all the way up to $100. You see all the bicycles, and it's the same ones that you buy for a bike.
Okay.
So yes, that is a reflector, and it's sort of like a strobe light because they
right.
Flash. So yes, those are more costly. We're not trying to put an expense on people who are already victims of accidents or who are already handicapped, but we just want to make them a little safer. So whichever one they want. But we just want to put it on their minds and on their hearts to save themselves and to save anybody else from running into them.
Well, I thank you for bringing this on, and Madam Chairwoman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Any other questions from committee members to Senator James? All right. Seeing none, do I have anyone in the audience that wishes to testify for or against the piece of legislation? Seeing none, at this time, what's the desire of the committee? Representative Frazier.
Madam Chair, I request that we support Senate Bill 238, LC 352517S.
Okay, you're making a motion?
Motion, sir.
All right, do I have
ma'am,
a
I'm
second?
sorry.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by committee members? Representative Holcomb.
Madam Chair, I want to address one point. for the members of the committee, and this is not legal advice, but with respect to the carrot and stick approach, what jumps out at me is if we make this a statute, then it would place the burden for complying with this with these individuals. And the concept, as I understand it, is to enhance their safety by making it easier for drivers to be able to identify them. And they are not as nimble as I think Representative Cook and maybe some of us that can move out of the way quickly. And so I think I, as a driver, would love for them to have these reflectors so that way we could see them better. If they fail to comply, then they would be violating our state law, and that would be the penalty. That would be the stick. And so I don't think that we need to have an additional penalty as part of this. Just by enacting it into a statute is going to provide the stick that would come into play in the event that there was a lawsuit. Because if they were hit by a car and they did not have the reflectors, then the burden of the responsibility would shift to the individual in the wheelchair. And so for that reason, I will support it. Thank you.
And any additional comments? At this time, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say, what, Representative Taylor?
Yes, I'd like to know on what day this becomes effective. Is it going to be when the governor signs it, when it gets through? Okay, you did not put a date on it, so it would be if once it's passed through. Okay.
Willing to.
It's legislative council has indicated it's not needed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, seeing none, we call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. So we have 2 noes and everyone else ayes. So we have the passage of Senate Bill 238, LC 352517S, and it goes to rules. There was one abstain. Thank you. All right, do we have any other business to come before the committee at this time?
Thank you very much.
In that case, we stand adjourned.
And Limore James is carrying the bill. Thank you so much. Thank you.